I used to measure a good day by how ordinary it felt inside these walls. The dishwasher's steady hush after dinner, the soft thump of laundry finishing a cycle, the way the bedroom lamp made the headboard look like it belonged in a magazine we could never afford. We had a choreography that told me where each hour lived. My coffee mug nested inside hers on the drying rack. Her keys always slept in the little ceramic bowl we bought from a street fair and called the safe. The house made sense, which was my favorite magic trick of adulthood. The first disturbance sounded like nothing at all. A notification buried under running water. A suitcase set down too softly, as if it had learned manners. She started calling evenings by other names: strategy session, client dinner, late review, labels taped over hours I used to own. I told myself she was becoming the person her resume had promised. I told myself success has a scent, and it's not always something you recognize. Denial is industrious. It builds a scaffold out of credible excuses. I watched it work. The invisible barrier between her phone and my line of sight thickened by a millimeter each week. Screamed down at dinner, then on the couch, then even in the bathroom, like a pet that needs constant reassurance. The ring mark on her finger began to ghost at the edges, a pale crescent that looked like fatigue until I realized absence can tan a finger too. I learned the house's new voice at midnight. The refrigerator clicked on, with a sound like a throat clearing before a confession. The ice maker coughed once, decided against it, and stayed silent. The clock over the stove turned honest and loud, reminding me how long ordinary takes when you're waiting for a door to open. She came home with airport soap on her hands and an apology pre-installed in her smile. She set her toad on the counter, and it exhaled the smell of a lobby pretending to be a garden. I aligned the mail into tidy regret and promised myself to stop looking for stories in paper. The suitcase changed first. She packed like an efficient person who expects to be seen. Cables coiled neatly, shirts folded with the muscle memory of a store clerk, the toiletry bag zipped so perfectly it made a quiet zipper sound I started to hate. When she returned, the contents nested back into drawers with the sleepiness of things that had been touched by other lighting. I told myself hotel light turns everything false. I told myself truth would look better here. Then I found the laundry slip from a chain I knew only from advertisements. It was dated a night I remembered warming pasta and eating straight from the pan because I didn't want to make plates for one. The old rituals began to look like costumes. Tuesday pasta night still happened. The sauce clung to the wooden spoon like always. But she stirred with her wrist bent the way you do when you don't want to chip a new manicure. Her laughter returned to the house in pieces, short clips cut from larger reels. She hummed a song I didn't know and turned the volume down when I asked what it was. My brain, wanting to survive, wrote softer captions under sharper pictures. Pressure at work, new playlist, seasonal effect of anything. Suspicion taught me patience before it taught me cruelty. I stopped asking questions I wasn't ready to record answers to. Instead, I watched how she watched time. She checked the oven clock more often. She traveled the hallway like a person walking from one world into another. The bathroom smelled faintly of peony after a shower, which would have been pretty if the word didn't feel like a lie in perfume form. I stood at the sink later and tried to wash that word out of the tile grout with my thumbnail. The second phone arrived by accident the way avalanches are. Accidents. Her toad slipped off the chair, opened its mouth, and spilled its private weather across the hardwood. Wallet, lipstick I'd never seen, a sleek black rectangle with no case and too much newness. I told my hand not to touch it, and my hand obeyed the first time. The second time it didn't. The screen woke to a wallpaper I didn't recognize and a preview I couldn't misinterpret. A time, a place, and the lazy grammar of comfort between people who have stopped pretending to be careful. I put it back exactly as gravity had arranged it, and pretended to have learned nothing. Then I learned how long you can lie to yourself without moving a muscle. 40 seconds. Maybe less. Sleep is an extortionist when you owe it truth. I lay beside her and watched the ceiling practice its blank face. I counted the seconds between the soft clicks of the baseboard heating and tried to use math like a sedative. At 3, I stood, walked to the office that is mostly a desk and a promise we'd start keeping receipts, and opened the laptop to a search bar that has seen worse. I typed like a criminal and read like a saint. Track without access, recorder that doesn't blink, how to save sanity with evidence. I closed the computer when the house shifted in its sleep, the way houses do when they hear a plan form inside them. Morning is cruel because it's condensing. Light fell into the kitchen in polite rectangles and made the cutting board look clean. She poured coffee with that little turn of the wrist that used to make me love Sundays. She asked about my day the way you ask a neighbor about theirs. I answered in sentences that had let go of their adjectives. We were two presenters at the same conference, swapping agendas because politeness is a tool humans invented when honesty underperformed. I started counting. Not in the notebook yet. That felt like surrender. I counted in my pulse, and along the baseboards, and inside the clink of ice into a glass. How many nights late? How many shower starts upon arrival? How many new meetings with vague names? Patterns hate being invisible. They work their way into the curtain hem, and the shoe tray, and the rhythm of footsteps up the stairs. They learn to make you fluent in them. I became conversational. There was mercy in the decision to stop improvising my denial. I told her, gently and with a rehearsed sigh, that I had a trip coming up. 3 days. Chicago. The way her face responded made me understand she knew what this permission meant. Not the freedom to miss me, but the space to be bold. She wished me luck as if success were contagious. I thanked her like a man accepting a blessing he didn't believe in. Preparation turned my hands into instruments. The tracker sat under her trunk lip like a secret punctuation mark and clicked into place with a sound only guilty people hear. A tiny recorder learned the underside of the hallway console table where keys rattle and alibis improve. I practiced the posture of invisibility in the bedroom mirror, shoulders relaxed, mouth undecided, eyes that look past rather than into. I practiced removing myself from the center of a room. The night before she left for her latest quarterly, I curated the house like a museum of former life. I stood in the doorways and looked at furniture as if it could answer questions. The arm of the couch where I always sat had a feint where that looked like devotion. The plant we never named leaned toward the window, with the shamelessness of living things that want more light and don't apologize for it. I touched the back of her chair at the dining table and felt the ghost of dinners when we didn't have to be interesting to each other to be in love. She packed to a soundtrack I couldn't hear. When she zipped the suitcase, the room felt vacuum sealed. I lay in bed and listened for the soft clatter of a hanger in the closet and could tell, from the metal onwood sound alone, which blouse she had chosen. People will tell you infidelity is discovered with eyes. It isn't. It's the ears that become ruthless. At 5:30, the garage door opened with the usual complaint about mornings. At 5:31, the tires found the street and made agreements with the day I couldn't stop. I stood at the kitchen window and watched our car travel a life I had not been invited into. The kettle wheezed, which felt appropriate. I put my palm on the counter and told the house I would come back with something it could hold without breaking. By 7, I had packed my own bag with instruments that looked like normal things. A notebook with margins wide enough to confess calculation. A pen that didn't leak like my patience. A cap that made my face into a suggestion. I sat in the car and practiced breathing until the seat believed me. I drove away from the house slowly because leaving fast looks like a different sort of crime. At the corner, I turned left as if habit were still in charge. At the next light, I turned the tracker's app into a second conscience. A small red dot crawled along streets I'd taught her to trust. The car filled with a silence that started to feel useful. Somewhere 2 blocks over, a dog insisted that morning didn't mean forgiveness. I agreed. The city wakes in layers. Trucks cough themselves into purpose. Crosswalk signals decide to believe in humanity again. Coffee shops make that high ringing sound when mugs and counters reunite. I passed through all of it like a note that isn't in the chord. The red dot paused at a light. My heart paused with it, and then refused to start until the map scrolled. The dashboard's clock stamped little verdicts at the edge of the hour. I thought about how many calendars I had trusted that didn't include me. I learned, on that first stretch of following without admitting I was following, that patience can feel like agency when you finally choose it on purpose. I did not speed up at yellows. I did not lean forward at greens, like a man eager to get to the scene of his own humiliation. I drifted inside the speed limit and counted mailbox flags and named the trees after the excuses I had accepted. Oak became team dinner. Maple became early call. The ginkgo at the end of the boulevard became you're being paranoid. It dropped a single fan-shaped leaf at the exact moment my phone buzzed a tiny red correction to the dot's path. The leaf turned over twice and slept where it landed. When the hotel finally appeared, a clean rectangle of glass promising anonymity to people rich in reasons, I recognized it not because we had stayed there, but because I had always suspected that someday a building like this would end a version of me. I didn't pull in. I thought about how many thresholds I had crossed without understanding their cost and decided this one didn't give my footsteps. I parked 3 blocks away and let the street do what streets do best, hold the weight of people too stubborn to ask for directions. The house was far behind me by then, small and forgiven. This was not its fault. It had given us everything ordinary we demanded and then some. The rest of the story would unfold elsewhere, under lights too warm to be innocent, within walls that sell discretion the way bakeries sell sugar. My job in this first act was not to end anything. It was to stop pretending beginnings happen without witnesses. So I sat in the car and watched the map, and watched a door across a small piece of city swallow what I had been calling my life. And I learned the exact sound a steering wheel makes when you grip it hard enough to keep from screaming, but not so hard you leave marks. It's a little squeak, almost conversational. The sort of sound houses make at midnight when they want to confess something, but you aren't ready. The red dot on my phone moved like a second hand with an agenda. I kept 2 cars between us and a lie between me and the truth I'd already learned to expect. Daylight was supposed to be merciful, open, ordinary, full of witnesses, but it only made everything clearer. Sun on the hood. Sun on her rear window when she checked the mirror and didn't see me. Sun on the street signs that had once meant brunch and errands and now meant evidence. I drove the way you drive when you're pretending you're going somewhere else, easy on the gas, lazy at greens, content to let pedestrians remind you the city belongs to people with nothing to hide. My dashboard displayed a version of calm, fuel temperature, a clock that refused drama. Inside me, an instrument panel the manufacturer never installed glowed red across the board. I did not adjust the radio. I did not call a friend. I did not blink more than I had to. The car had become a rehearsal room for a face that gives nothing away. She turned off at an exit we never needed, one that led toward business hotels and a neat grid of streets designed to make outsiders feel like insiders. I let a delivery truck slide between us and pretended to be grateful for its stubborn bulk. The tracker pinged, polite as always, a soft buzz against my thigh as if to say, we're still on script. Noon light flattened the buildings, shaved their edges, made even the shine look tired. I could see the revolving door from 2 blocks out, the hotel's glass mouth where people disappear not to be eaten, but to be digested into stories They won't write down. I did not follow her into that mouth. That would be a different chapter. This one belonged to the streets. To asphalt that remembers tires but never judges them. To lane lines that only ask you not to touch them on purpose. I rolled past the entrance and parked on the service road where catering vans nap between events. From there, I could trace her path in reflections. A suggestion of her hair in a storefront window. The tilt of her shoulder in the shiny back of a pillar. A smear of familiar color as revolving glass made slow weather of strangers. I wrote times, not feelings. I sketched arrows instead of conclusions. If I gave myself nouns, the verbs would come later whether I wanted them to or not. The car interior learned my tells. My jaw would lock when the tracker paused. My left thumb would press into the steering wheel seam when she drifted out of sight. My breath would shorten when the red dot turned into a still point, the universal punctuation of secrecy. When she reappeared, it would lengthen again, an accordion of refusal and relief, until it learned the day's melody by heart. Traffic swelled and receded like the tide. At intersections I let people cut in, grateful for the camouflage of courtesy. A cyclist flashed by and glanced in, eyes instinctively hunting for menace. I held my gaze on the middle distance and offered him the profile of a man whose only plan was to arrive eventually. A couple with paper cups crossed against the light, laughing at something portable. I envied their ignorance the way you envy shade in August, not because it's rare, but because I had stepped out of it on purpose. Her car, the one I had washed 100 times and once named as a joke we both forgot, left the garage and threaded downtown like a bead on invisible string. I followed 3 blocks back. She didn't drive like someone afraid. She drove like someone with a new home she visited in chapters. The map on my phone was clinical in its kindness. No commentary, only lines. I watched those lines work their way through neighborhoods we used to narrate to each other. Here's the bakery I keep meaning to try. Here's the park with the dog statues that make no sense. Here's the building I once dreamed of working in. I let those old sentences drift and settle in the footwell with the dust. At a long red, I could see her profile clearly, thrown up in the rear view like a familiarity the window chose to give me. She was singing, lid-shaping words I couldn't hear, the little shoulder bounce that used to mean lightness. Daylight is cruel that way. It takes away the alibi of shadows and leaves you with what is. She didn't look guilty. She looked alive. And I understood, in a way that hurt more cleanly than anger ever could, that aliveness had simply stopped including me. I kept moving. Past office towers with their noon to 2 hunger. Past a fountain that persisted despite the city's annual threats to turn it off. Past a street performer whose violin turned corners into soft edges. The tracker, left to its own devices, reported without spin. A pause here. A turn there. A brief stop near a pharmacy where cheating couples buy reputable items to disguise disreputable plans. Mints, headache pills, travel size anything. She emerged with a paper bag that told no story at all. In stakeout hours, daylight version, your senses sharpen around the banal. The air vent sounds like patience. The seatbelt rub mark on your collarbone becomes a metronome. Even the smudge on the lower left of the windshield transforms into a landmark you navigate by. I use those things to measure the day the way sailors use stars, not because they're realer than land, but because they keep you looking up long enough to forget you're floating. She re-entered the hotel's orbit like gravity works on those who consent to it. I let a bus and 2 unambitious sedans craft me a disguise. The doorman exchanged that polite nod with her, the one people in uniforms learn in training, the one that says, I see you, and what you are doing is none of my business as long as your credit card goes through. I wrote down the time because in the world I was building, everything would have to have a time. Cars nosed in and out around me. A man in a compact honked twice at no one. A rideshare idled in the loading zone, while the driver watched a soccer recap on his phone, neck tilted to care more comfortably. The city kept happening through my windshield while I sat still enough to become part of the scenery. That was the discipline, not to fill the silence with noise, not to practice imaginary confrontations with an audience of upholstery, not to narrate my hurt into heroics. The car insisted on stillness. I obeyed. I tried to inventory motives and then abandoned the attempt. Motive is courtroom furniture. I needed architecture. The floor plan of betrayal is simple if you look at it from above. Entry. Meet. Pause. Exit. Repeat. Daylight had stripped the floor plan of romance. She was efficient. He was punctual. The city gave them cover because the city always does. When she finally left the hotel for the day, light had shifted from white to gold. Sun collected along the edges of windows like a tip. She walked like someone satisfied by a job well done. I did not parse what job meant anymore. She got into the car with a small exhale that once belonged to our couch and joined the right lane like it had been waiting to welcome her back. I let 3 cars slip between us before I put my signal on. The tracker didn't care whether I watched with my eyes or my app. I did both greedily. On the way home, she stopped at a grocery store we both dislike. Too bright, too clean, the fruit stacked in pyramids that look like truths that never bruise. She went in and came out with a paper bag and a detached expression that had been polished smooth from use. It was a look you wear when you're certain your story fits in daylight as easily as at night. I wrote that down as well. Look, polished. Expression, lessened. Rush hour tried to make a fool of me. Lanes pinched. Merging turned into confessionals drivers held for themselves. I dropped back far enough that losing sight would have been easy. The red dot saved me from that softness. It winked and pulsed and insisted I keep my promises. I did. The route back to our neighborhood was the reverse of the one we used to take to the movies, a choreography my hands could perform without my eyes. I kept my eyes anyway. Even a homeward turn becomes a stranger when you've taught your body not to trust the obvious. She pulled into our driveway as if nothing in the day had asked her to alter her face. Garage door up, car in, garage door down. 3 movements that, once upon a time, I would have called relief. I cruised past, turned at the corner, disappeared for 10 minutes the way a magician disappears a scarf, in plain sight. When I returned, I took the spot 3 houses down where a maple tree throws late-day shade like a benediction. From there, I could see the kitchen window and the choreography of dinner begin. Faucet, drawer, the brief choreography of spices. She was cooking. I wondered if the grocery bag held penance or habit. I didn't give myself an answer. I wrote. Not sentences, those belong to later, when you're convincing people who prefer a story to a fact. I wrote a ledger. 11:36 arrival hotel, 12:07 exit for pharmacy, 12:22 return, 14:55 leave hotel, 15:18 grocery, 16:02 home. Numbers like fence posts in a field I meant to claim. Daylight has a way of laundering suspicion into math. I leaned into that. The car smelled like coffee I didn't drink and determination I didn't speak. People walked their dogs. Kids on bikes invented a game with rules they shouted and broke in the same breath. A man jogged past me twice, sweat making continents on his shirt. Neighborhood noises laid themselves like a blanket over the lid my chest had become. I thought about the dinner plates in our cabinet. I thought about whether I would set them soon in front of people whose faces I could already picture cracking. Then I shelved the thought for later because this was not yet the part where scenes change rooms. When the kitchen light flicked off and the hallway light flicked on and the bedroom light briefly tested its bulb, 3 small beacons forming a triangle, I let the car exhale and did the same. I drove around the block one last time, just to feel motion behave, and headed to the storage unit where I'd left the things I didn't want the house to explain. A small projector. A cable bag with every adapter known to man. A slim black folder labeled with my worst handwriting, Times. I placed them in the trunk and closed it softly. Daylight made the paint of the car look honest again. On the way back, I stopped at the park where we'd once agreed, beneath a foolishly cinematic sunset, never to be the couple who lies. A teenager threw a frisbee badly to a patient dog. A father pushed a stroller, with the concentration of a man memorizing a map. I sat with the engine off and listened to the car tick as he left it piece by piece. That sound felt like rehearsal for something cooling in me as well. Not feeling, exactly, but the fever of arguing with reality. The day had offered me its leisure. My job had been to take it. Driving home the last mile, I let myself think in futures, not fantasies. There would be a room with chairs and a screen and a simple ask, watch. There would be a table later with plates and a quiet and a different ask, listen. And there would be the streets again, because streets never stop being available to their assignments. But for now, the car rolled into our neighborhood under a sky that had turned the color of apology. I parked behind the maple again and wrote the final entry of the day, 1742, lights settle. I didn't knock. I didn't even walk up. I watched a rectangle of window turn from gold to gray, and then to nothing, the universal color of houses that believe they have survived another day. I put the pen away, the phone face down, the seat back 2 clicks. Daylight had done its job without theatrics. It had turned what I feared into what I knew. And in that quiet, tidy knowledge, I let my eyes close for exactly 7 breaths before starting the engine and moving one street over. I was done for the day. The car, like me, had learned how to be patient without asking for praise. The hallway carpet muffled everything. Footsteps. Doubt. Even the rhythm of my pulse. Hotels do that. They design for discretion, engineer quiet like it's a utility. And that night, as the door clicked shut behind me, the silence felt rehearsed, as if the room itself had been waiting to host this particular betrayal. The space was ordinary on purpose. Beige walls, a bedspread with geometric patterns too busy to memorize, curtains thick enough to block out a city. I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone on the nightstand, the tracker's app still glowing. The red dot was back where I expected it to be. Here. With me. With us. I didn't need to look out the window to know her car was parked in the garage below, tucked among strangers. The map confirmed what the room already told me. I wasn't imagining this. The air conditioner hummed, a steady artificial breeze trying too hard to be natural. I caught myself focusing on it just to keep from rehearsing conversations. Words like why and how long floated up, then fizzled out. They weren't for tonight. Tonight wasn't about questions. Tonight was about proof. On the desk, a small black bag rested open, the zipper teeth parted like a grin. Inside, the projector, the cables, the folder marked times. I'd set them out earlier, in daylight, when the city was still loud enough to drown out the weight of what I was doing. Now the objects felt heavier. Intent always weighs more in silence. I turned the TV on, not to watch, but to fill the air. A game show flickered, contestants laughing at prizes. Their joy was canned, predictable, forgettable. I lowered the volume until it was only a heartbeat in the corner of the room, then lay back across the bedspread and stared at the ceiling. The ceiling didn't blink. It just existed, plain, indifferent, a blank witness that couldn't be cross-examined. Time bent strangely. Minutes swelled and popped like soap bubbles. The clock on the nightstand told the truth, but my body didn't care. I kept checking the app, refreshing, staring at the same glowing dot. She hadn't moved. She was still here. Still in this hotel. Still making choices that had already burned our house down without leaving a visible flame. When I finally stood, it was less decision than momentum. I set up the projector on the desk, connected cables with a precision that felt like ritual. I didn't test it, I trusted it. Technology, unlike people, either works or it doesn't. No in between. I left the folder sealed. The times inside were already etched into me. I didn't need to reread my own handwriting to remember the choreography of betrayal. The bathroom mirror caught me when I went in to wash my face. For a moment, I didn't recognize the man staring back. His eyes looked wired, not from caffeine, but from clarity. His jaw carried a story it hadn't told yet. I splashed cold water and let it run down, tiny rivers carrying away the last traces of hesitation. When I straightened, the man in the mirror nodded. Agreement. Contract signed without words. I dimmed the lamps, leaving the room in a twilight that matched the city outside. Curtains closed, walls holding their breath. The bed, unslept in, stretched like an accusation. I sat back down, hands folded in my lap, and listened. Not to footsteps, there were none. Not to voices, they were elsewhere. I listened to the building itself, the sigh of pipes, the faint thrum of an elevator rising. Every sound reminded me that secrets never exist in isolation. They always leave traces, echoes, something to catch if you're willing to hear. My phone buzzed once, a notification from the app. Movement. The dot shifted, climbing one floor higher. My chest tightened, but my hands stayed still. A few minutes later, the dot returned, circling back to the same room. Not hers. Not ours. His. Their orbit was tight, efficient, practiced. And I realized, with a sharp clarity, that I wasn't documenting an accident. This was routine. This was their Tuesday night. Their Thursday night. Their normal. The game show ended. A commercial for laundry detergent played on mute. The laugh track had gone silent. I turned the TV off and sat in the kind of dark that isn't complete but feels close enough. In that dark, I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the air conditioner. Louder than the city. Louder than reason. I didn't sleep. Sleep requires safety, and this room wasn't safe. Not because of locks or doors, but because of the truth sitting in the corner, zipped into a bag. The projector was patient. It didn't care when I used it. It didn't care if my hand shook or if my voice cracked. It would display what I fed it, without judgment. Machines are merciless that way. At some point, long past midnight, I stood by the window and peeled the curtain back an inch. Below, headlights smeared the street in ribbons of white and red. People walked under awnings, shoulders hunched, conversations hidden in pockets of night. A couple laughed as they crossed the street, their joy rising unashamed into the air. I let the curtain fall back and reminded myself, not everyone lies. Not everyone betrays. But the one person who shouldn't have, did. When dawn teased the edges of the curtain, I was still sitting. The phone was still glowing. The dot had gone still again. She hadn't left. The night was theirs. But the morning would be mine. The dining room table had always been a stage. Holidays, birthdays, graduations, it had carried cakes, roasts, candles, and laughter. But tonight, its polish would gleam like a spotlight, and every chair around it felt like part of an audience that didn't know the play they were about to watch. I placed the projector at the head of the table, cords tucked neatly beneath a placemat. Plates were set, silverware arranged, glasses filled halfway with wine that caught the chandelier's glow. Everything looked ordinary on purpose. I wanted them lulled into thinking this was another evening of clinking cutlery and small talk. She walked in first, smiling that automatic smile she reserved for family settings. The kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. Behind her, he followed, casual, confident enough to assume he belonged here. My best friend. My shadow. My executioner. Neither of them noticed the subtle hum of electronics hidden among the dinnerware. "Looks great," she said, taking her seat. She leaned in to kiss my cheek. I turned just enough so her lips brushed air. She frowned, barely, and looked down at her napkin as though it might explain my coldness. We ate for a while, the sounds of cutlery clinking against plates filling the gaps in conversation. My parents made small talk, my sister laughed at some story, and for a moment, it almost passed as normal. Almost. My heart counted down, like a clock no one else could hear. When dessert plates were cleared, I stood. My chair scraped against the wood, drawing every eye toward me. I didn't smile. I didn't clear my throat. I just pressed a button. The chandelier dimmed, the projector hummed, and the far wall lit up. At first, confusion. A timestamp appeared, white digits ticking quietly in the corner. Then the grainy footage of a car pulling into a hotel parking lot. Her car. The same make, the same scratches on the bumper. She froze, fork halfway to her lips. He stiffened beside her. Gasps erupted from the table. My mother's hand covered her mouth. My father muttered something sharp under his breath. My sister's laughter died, like a candle in the wind. The footage rolled on. Hotel lobbies. Elevators. Room numbers. Each clip brief, clinical, devastating. I hadn't added commentary because the images spoke louder than I ever could. Every timestamp aligned, every clip undeniable. Finally, I spoke. My voice didn't shake. "While you were here with us, smiling, laughing, celebrating birthdays, this is where you really were. With him," she whispered. "Stop." Her voice cracked, thin as glass. I didn't stop. The last clip filled the wall, the two of them entering a hotel room together. Not touching, not kissing, just the door closing behind them. Suggestion heavy enough to crush. "I gave you years," I said, stepping closer. "Trust. Love. My best friend. And this is what you did with it." The silence after was brutal. No one moved. She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled it back as though burned. He tried to speak, but my father cut him off with a glare sharp enough to draw blood. I picked up the remote, shut the projector down. The wall went blank, but the damage was carved into everyone's eyes. "I won't fight here," I said evenly. "Not in front of family. But understand this, you don't get to rewrite what's been shown. You don't get to pretend it didn't happen. The truth is out. Everyone knows." Chairs scraped back. My sister stood first, muttering something about needing air. My parents followed, their faces stone, unreadable. One by one, they left the table, leaving the three of us in a silence thick with fallout. She sobbed quietly, shoulders shaking, mascara smudging into the napkin she clutched. He sat rigid, jaw clenched, staring at the empty wall as though willing it to change. I didn't comfort her. I didn't confront him. I just walked out. My footsteps echoed down the hallway, steady, final. Behind me, the house that once held laughter now rang with the truth, louder than any argument. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. The weight wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. And that was enough.